Hi, welcome to this panel session where we will be discussing how does core banking technology accelerate digital transformation. With me today, I have an all-star panel from different companies having various perspectives on core banking. My name is Christopher Hernes. I'll be your moderator for this chat. I work as an independent consultant, but before that I have a long experience within the banking area, also when it comes to evaluating and implementing core banking solutions. So enough about me. I'll let our participants introduce themselves. So starting with you, Fredrik.
Okay, hi, my name is Fredrik Oldenholm. I'm the CEO of Vilja, and been here with Vilja for close to 5 years.
And for those who just joining in, Vilja Solutions, what are you guys up to?
Okay, yeah, so we make cloud native core banking platforms for fintechs and for banks and anyone else with an ambition to lend out or deposit, have a saving solutions.
Exciting. You will most definitely give some good perspectives in the chat. Everybody's talking about the cloud. Few know what the benefits are, so we can dive into that. Ayas, give us your introduction.
Thank you, Christopher, and thank you, FinTech Week, for inviting me and Microsoft. My name is Ayas. I work as a digital strategist at Microsoft. I've been doing that for 3 years, focusing on banking and insurance. And kind of my role is interesting for sure. It kind of connects the business piece, which is whatever makes sense of core banking, payments, customer experience, and how that relates to Microsoft technology and cloud platform, which is in cloud solutions and strategy. Thank you.
Great. You probably all know Microsoft from an end user perspective, but myself, I had the pleasure of exploring the Azure platform for banking applications. And we'll surely hear more about that today also. Marcus.
Yes. So my name is Marcus Mossberg, and I am co-founder and chief product officer of Froda. And Froda is a fintech company that focuses on providing simple and digital business financing.
So you are more from the customer side of core banking, or like we have prepared, what you will call it from a more fintech perspective.
Yes, that's right.
And Justus.
Hi, first of all, thanks for having me also here today. Hi, I'm Justus Ru, based in Amsterdam, heading up solutions engineering for Mambu. And basically, Mambu, we've just had our 10-year existence now in the past month, and also recent unicorn status in Europe. We are SaaS cloud banking solutions. And welcome to give some vendor discussions.
And for us who are familiar with the core banking space, Mambu is one of the up-and-coming providers challenging the incumbents in that field. So it's going to be interesting to hear what you say. Now that we have been polite and done the round in an orderly fashion, I will now welcome a more anarchy approach to whoever gets to speak. So it's going to be first come, first serve. For those who are listening, core banking, my experience with core banking, this is a topic that has different meaning regarding on who you ask. So from your diverse perspective, even though we are 5 men here, at least we have some diversity in terms of what kind of companies we are representing. What is the definition of core banking in 2021? How should we approach it today, apart from how we have viewed core banking in the past?
Right, free for all. So I think maybe going from this first side here. I think the great thing about core banking is, and we'll get to that probably in the discussion today, it's incredibly changed in the past few years. Where we are right now within the Mambu side is we believe core banking is part of a composable ecosystem. What does composable ecosystem mean? It means that there's different parts of this sort of banking landscape where people focus on specific things that they're good at. For example, Mambu focuses specifically in terms of the core banking, which is lending, deposits, but to create those sub-ledgers. However, someone else would be security in terms of more of customer checks, KYC checks. These are all specific functions that are sort of best of breed these days. But in the past, would have been one big, massive core. And with cloud adaptation, people are tending to be more specialized in specifically what it is they want. So this is how we see core banking right now, more as a commodity rather than the sort of the nuts and bolts for the customer that what they want. Putting it up to the rest of the panel.
You had a very specific choice of words here by using composable apart from modular. I would love you to elaborate on just your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think when we talk about composable, when we think of modular, it's like, yes, it's all these different models, but I see modular as a jigsaw puzzle where you are only able to build one picture, because if you buy this piece, you can only buy this other piece and get it together. With composable, we're thinking more in terms of Lego blocks. Yes, you can only use Lego blocks with Lego blocks, but you can build whatever you want to build. And this is where, if you come to SaaS technology, we're an open API, standard APIs, and able to integrate with various different systems. It's where we see the future is going to. And I think from Marcus's side, coming from the fintech side, is all you want to do is you want to have a handbook to say, okay, I want to build this customer experience for it. I don't care as much in terms of the core. It needs to serve a function. It's a commodity. My value is in the customer process. So what differentiates me differently. So composable is enabling these fintechs and all these businesses coming up to be able to build their bank for the future.
Yeah, definitely. I think sort of when you're trying to build a business from scratch, it's so tremendously important to focus, and being able to sort of get access to off-the-shelf components and modular or composable in some way, building your business on top of that is probably a prerequisite for a lot of fintechs to even exist these days. So, and I think that a lot of financial products are also pretty deceptively hard to build. It seems kind of easy on the surface, but when you sort of go beneath it, you sort of discover all these nuances to everything with regulatory aspects and so on that you don't want to build everything yourself. You really want to rely on the works of others to do that.
And just a point of me, I think if you would start a bank today, you would probably not build it yourself, and you would maybe not do a more traditional approach. You buy a CD or a disc. Now everything is SaaS waste, like you buy any other services, whether that's Netflix or what have you, even though that's far-fetched from maybe core banking. But I think the way you consume the service and your expectations on the service today is much different than before, even though I think the elephant in the room is compliance. That still puts a lot of pressure on how you can build and how it should look like. But I think the technology of today looks very different than most of the banks who have been there for many years.
Yeah. And I think if you take a step back and sort of look at the concept of core banking from our perspective, I think we always talk about these big banks, but I think a very useful tool when looking at this is sort of looking at the actual jobs to be done rather than the sort of the tools that we currently use to perform those jobs. And I think the reasoning there is that the jobs are inherently tied to some sort of deep customer need that they're trying to solve. But the tools are sort of always evolving based on sort of societal and technological progress. So, for instance, to me, sort of core banking is fundamentally just people that have a little bit of extra money that they want to earn some interest on, and on the other side you have lenders that would like to borrow some money, and they're happy to pay for the privilege of doing so. And sort of core banking is simply the facilitation of these two parties meeting, and that can happen in a vast number of ways, which sort of a traditional bank is one of those ways, but there are much sort of thinner slices to that where customers from both sides can meet. So I think that is sort of something that you shouldn't miss, that sort of part of when you talk about core banking, that it's not sort of the entire core. It's just the facilitation of some of that process in some sort of slice.
Fredrik, you were...
Yeah. So, I mean, I think a lot of what we see as a core bank has been said, but to reiterate to that, I mean, we see that we cover the processes for onboarding, origination, and servicing is, the functionality that is the core banking is surrounded. But that should, of course, be possible to adjust, and it should be very flexible, so that our customers, the banks, are able to create those customer journeys that they want, and they are that they try out for their potential different types of customer journeys to test and to be very agile and be able to quickly create new customer journeys. Because like Marcus said, the bank shouldn't have to focus so much maybe on the compliance or on regular tasks, but should be able to focus on that customer journey. There's perhaps their credit scoring models that makes them unique and make their proposition unique. And compliance is something that is for everyone, so that should be part of this cloud native core banking platform. In addition to that, I think that you need to be able to have a very flexible ecosystem. I think you also mentioned that from Mambu, that because any bank has different options, there are new things coming up all the time that you need to be able to connect to in order to create either this journey or to create a better scorecard. But I also think that the future, and it's almost already here, is that for the core banking also needs to be this AI engine where you store all the data and have all the data in order to be able to create personal experiences for the customer and also that those customizations that every customer need, and also to be able to create that close to real-time experience in regards to this. And I think that the core banking plays a very central part in collecting all this data to create those experiences.
There's so many things I want to elaborate and ask you guys about coming out of your views of core banking. So we'll just have to try and be short and sweet. But we have touched upon a couple of technologies. We touched upon cloud for a couple of times. You also mentioned the machine learning, AI, as an inherent part of core banking. We are obviously sitting here participating in a core banking panel, some of the few people who are interested in core banking and the underlying technology. For the non-technical listeners out there, what are the key technologies that you really have to understand the implications of when you evaluate and look at your core banking choices going forward, and why? So what role does cloud play from a core banking perspective, other than everybody has been at some conference where a cloud-enabled core banking suite sounds cool and everybody wants to get in on that?
I think that the most important thing about cloud in the core banking is the ability to scale fast, and if you have a campaign or if you have something that needs a very big, large extra number of computers doing number crunching, you need to be able to scale fast. If you have this in the bank's basement, you can't have 80% capacity that is not being used. But with the cloud, it gives you the ability to scale, basically. And also, you don't need to have an organization that is focused on upgrading computers and upgrading software programs, but rather they can focus on their business instead.
Mm.
And I mean, from the perspective of the banks that are starting up now, it's obviously a big benefit also not to invest in those things in the first place. So I think that's probably a big part of it as well.
Yeah, it almost, cloud is almost becoming sort of the norm. If you look at the fintech guys, you don't want to have that capital investment. Specifically, when you think in terms of how unsure the world is right now, you want to actually have that MVP quickly go to the market. But this is not only just for the fintech guys. It's only for, if you think of bigger banks they've got the infrastructure already up and running. What are the sort of the barriers to entry? It's normally gaining access to a payments network, it's gaining access to a card. And you're finding, again, best of breeds in these ecosystems of being able to specialize specifically in this. So again, Marcus comes actually a bit earlier to what you said. You don't want your developers to learn accounting. You just want to plug into something that a UI plug and play, the guys can figure out to be not agile just in the IT side, but agile in the business side as well. And if you're agile, you don't want to have that cost, like Frederick said. You don't want to be able to get all these investments. So it opens up a lot of opportunities for competition, but also I think in our minds, it's not just the fintechs. It's also these bigger banks that just realize suddenly we can transform without doing the investment to our business as usual. We can run sort of a speedboat of this massive oil tanker that's continuously going off, but they can still gain from the services that this oil tanker has, i.e. Access to payment networks. So yeah, cloud is here to stay, and it's fascinating to see how adaptations just become normal. How much of it are using 365 now? It's just run of the mill. You don't have anything stored anymore, and natural grid is quite exciting.
I think definitely cloud is one of the big sort of frictions that has been sort of a limitation for a lot of customers to a lot of businesses to scale. And I think one of the things that we really start, if you want to understand where sort of the world is headed, you start to understand these kind of underlying jobs to be done, and then you sort of fundamentally what technology and digitalization is doing is basically removing points of friction, right? So and if you built your business or your scale advantage around a point of friction that's replaced, then you're in big trouble. So, and I think, and for instance, distribution was one of those big things that was very hard to do, and now it's basically free. So that turned a lot of value chains upside down. And I think this is also happening in the financing world as well, where some points of friction that used to be very hard are now getting easier by the minute. And as sort of margin costs and everything goes down to zero, a lot of value chains are gonna switch around, and there's going to be some winners and some losers. And I think sort of the cloud and the sort of infrastructure investments is one of those friction points that now is available to everybody.
But you have mentioned the incumbents a couple of times, and I think for those who are joining us working within the established banking industry, many have probably looked at their core banking suite, their tech stack, which is hopefully not all stacked in basements everywhere. So should incumbents still follow the narrative that if it's not broken, don't fix it? Is it still viable to encapsulate the traditional core banking monolith and just put layers around the onion to drive digital innovation, or are we just putting digital lipstick on the pig?
I think Frederick made a really good point earlier in terms of people should focus on that customer journeys. But if you think of the incumbents and the past change that is happening now with COVID, how quickly were people able to change their product offering to adhere to the market, i.e. out a different product that is completely new and that will actually not give slippage into the customers. So yeah, we can put layers and layers around this onion, but if your core is still extremely static and tough to move around and to be able to adapt, then you're going to struggle. Then the incumbents are going to lose customers to the competition. That's sort of how I see it.
Yeah, I think we see it the same way. I mean, it's just to continue that path. I think it's going to be very dangerous path. I think, and this another dangerous path is to kind of make these large core banking replacement projects. They tend to take time, and at the end of the day, it's quite a risky thing to execute on. A better initiative is probably to go with the speedboat initiative, where you try new things in a new setting, and then slowly or methodically transfer the customers to the new initiatives, rather than making these large core banking replacements projects.
Just a point of me from my side, I see a lot of new banks building on cloud native, which is just an offshoot of existing banks. SEBx is a great example. We have numbers in Europe that are doing the same thing, where they kind of take a narrow approach of certain, whether it's retail or in any other areas. We have corporate finance as well in the Gulf area, where they're taking a snippet of what they're doing and gone fully digital. I think that's an easy way forward, right? To try something out, verify it works, and then let it scale by using cloud. But I think the elephant is still the large tanker. What will happen with that? As I see it, the large change in Nordea, for instance, make a full T25 move. That's a large project with a lot of risk in it. I think several banks are probably thinking that way, but it's very complex. So I think the tanker with building, I would say modular, but I know Justice will say something else, other things around it to ensure customer experience, because the key is giving the customer experience. That's where fintechs are today challenging banks and giving much more, Revolut and what have you, better experience to customers. And my son will choose some other bank with better customer experience for his account in the future. That's one aspect. But I think the key is data and how to utilize data and bring insights back. These core banking systems today are filled with data, but what kind of insights are they gathering and building on, and what value does that bring to the advisor and to the end customer? I think that's the challenge.
Now, you're touching upon I think a key question for many incumbents, not only in banking but in every industry that has legacy IT somewhere stacked away in their own basement or somebody else's basement. So at some point you have to do some kind of either replacement or refurbishing of the tanker. I usually use the analogy: is it possible to launch a speedboat on the side of the tanker in terms of launching new products and services while you are doing the whole large migration? Because that will take a lot of time to wait before everything is in ship shape.
Yeah, I think again, if you're going to fail, you got to fail fast, and you can only try and implement it by actually doing these sort of speedboats. When we talk about customer experience, the customer's got no idea sometimes what's happening behind that app. It can be the same app, and you can just point it to a different site. And again, it comes back to how do you access the core information via API standard and getting that information back. Now, speedboats is the way of the future, we feel, because specifically for the big incumbents, it's just so less complicated to have a separate team somewhere else in isolation. Here's your no capital investment in terms of the SaaS solutions, in terms of what you need to build in the cloud. You don't need to hire all these guys in IT just to check the databases anymore. Try it out, but figure out if the failing point is on the customer experience or on the product side. And that only the business should know. And the core banking shouldn't be part of that, actually. The core banking should be able to flex and be able to give a product for the customer to involve. But it will always probably be on the user experience for that. Because if we're talking about transformation, technology is not going to be a silver bullet. It's all to do with culture and mindset, the organization and the company. So that's where I would focus on. So fail fast, but fail on the culture, see if it's working for you, and then use the technology to make sure. Again, that's what I see, yeah.
I usually say that legacy IT is the symptom, but legacy culture, that's the root cause of every legacy issue. That's been one of my mantras for the last 6 or 7 years when talking about bank IT. Moving along, if we move past below the core banking, if anybody knew there was something below that, the National Digital Infrastructure. This is Stockholm FinTech Week, and when it comes to digital infrastructure, I can be as humble as a Scandinavian can be and say that we are world class when it comes to digital infrastructure. And this sets the Scandinavian and Nordic region apart from many other regions when it comes to possibilities. How will that affect your choice in core banking and your abilities to build a digital banking experience?
Well, I think for us, for instance, I think that the availability of data we have a lot more data points in Scandinavia than we do in other places. So that really enables some of the transformation into sort of fully digital processes, like underwriting, for instance. That we have much more data here, and we are able to process like identification through bank ID and sort of signing for contracts and everything like that is just so much simpler. So that really, the sort of, there's a world of difference between a sort of semi-automated flow and a sort of a fully automated flow where you can sort of fetch all the data beforehand and just use machine learning and stuff like that to do like underwriting and to understand sort of the customers. So I think it's really a nice place to just see the sort of, I think we're going to be the sort of pioneers in that area because we do have the sort of availability of the data.
I just want to challenge you a bit. If you look at China with companies like Ping An and maybe Alipay, I'm not saying they're similar. The size of data is different, but the utilization of that is much more. So I think in some sense, I agree with you, having the unified approach with BankID and similar that supports kind of a transitioning phase. But I think China has moved past quite fast with their infrastructure and utilizing kind of data-driven banking and insurance and capital markets.
I think maybe one interesting comment coming from Africa is there is sometimes that institutional void. If you look at cell phone adaptation versus landline, where certain markets can just skip itself. Now, Sweden is in a great position there, and I think it comes back in terms of how people connect to it as well. But these gaps I do find is closing quickly as everybody's getting a Facebook account or a Twitter account, or digitalization is sort of a must-have now. So I'm curious to see how the rest of the more matured markets will follow the way of Sweden.
But in terms of our listeners sitting here now in the Nordics, either from fintechs or banks, are there any takeaways or learnings that we can look from China, Africa, Middle East? Are we looking at workarounds to compensate for a lack of unified solutions like BankID, or are we looking at leapfrogging towards something that's even more scalable and more useful?
If I just start, I think I've been studying China a bit. That's why I mentioned them. They kind of leapfrogged over the card kind of revolution. They went from physical fiat currency to digital. So we are more stuck in the card era still. We're not fully digital. Now we have digital wallets. So I think we're coming to that point. But the digital wallet, for instance, is a very kind of encapsulating force in Asia. It can be used for all services. I think in the Nordics and Europe, we haven't come yet to the conclusion of one wallet, as I see it. That's, I think, an opportunity, though. How can we go from a digital wallet singular approach? I think here regulation and what EU thinks might have a point on that. But in the way of using digital only, buying anything from cigarettes, or maybe no one buys that anymore, but ticket to your cinema, to do trading. You can do everything using your wallet. But I think from our perspective in Sweden, we still see some financial services are disrupted for sure digitally, but some are still traditional. You should have an advisor for that. And I think those processes need to disrupt a bit more so we can go fully digital.
So are we showing signs of hubris here in the Nordics, that we have reached the pinnacle of our achievements and nobody can catch up to us? It's a leading question because if you look at it, very few companies have actually managed to ride double waves of digital innovation. Nordic banks really got on top on the whole web-based online banking wave. So if you look at the digital camera producers, they're not around anymore, even though they outcompeted Nokia. So I think that's a food for thought for a lot of incumbents, at least, that have really been on top of digital, that this is no one-time or two-time exercise. This is a constant force of change that you really need to be on top of. And I think your perspective on, I would like to rewind a bit. I see that we're a bit over time, but we got some more time. That's a good thing. Rewind towards the product development and have that as a finishing topic. I think that's fascinating, and I think it's easy to overlook how minor constraints in the core banking solution really locks down your products and makes you unable to really launch new features or new products suited for a new time. So could we have a quick round around the table here from how do we see, what is the need to be flexible for both incumbents and fintechs going forward? And how will, of course, core banking either support or limit that?
I think that from our perspective, it's a bit like I touched upon in the beginning, and I think that's where the next thing will happen also for the banks, and it's the use of AI and use of the customer experiences and personalization that can be gained from it. And I think that if yes, our incumbent banks today, they were quite early in internet banks and so on, and mobile banks. But if they don't have the infrastructure in place below with their core banking technology, they're not going to be able to go in this next wave, which is going to be, the Google or Amazon experience that is needed in banking. That's not going to happen if they don't invest in these technologies. Or they should, through their ecosystem, like fintechs, connect with fintechs who can give them this customized experience. So they really need to be fast in coming up with new product ideas and to test new things and test new personalized experiences and customized experiences.
Yes. Any closing remarks?
Yeah, I just want to kind of stress the ecosystem play as I see it. I was mentioning China, but we have it here as well. Every other industry is going into this industry 4.0. Everything's part of an ecosystem. I think financial services just need to align to that as well. And I think core banking should not be a barrier to that. It should not be a system that stops connections between. So whether it's call it modular or composable, just the alignment to be part of an ecosystem to let the customer be able to do what they want to do and not hinder them. I think that's a key, but also then bring insights on top. That's the differentiation angle the banks and they can use going forward.
Marcus?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, you really sort of have to think hard when you don't have that much resources as to what you really want to be successful at doing. So it's really about focus and selecting like the things that you really, really want to be good at and pouring all your time into that, and having everything else like modular things that you can attach to the company and to dissolve the other processes. So for us, that's I think that's so everything that's core to our product. I think that's something that we want to keep in house, so we can be flexible. We can produce like an integrated, nice solution for the customer. But everything that's not really touched by the customer in that way is something that we gladly look for other companies to solve for us.
And just as you get the last words of wisdom here.
So yeah, I think at the end of the day, the core banking is all about trust, and we had spoke about the necessary evil, which is regulatory compliance. So if we want to engage still with the customer, we need to have agility out of IT, but also in product to be able to have those relevant products. But all of those products, to gain the trust, need to be according to accounting standards and everything. So if you've got a core that is able to give you that flexibility for your product and your business environment, that will just enable the customer to trust you more. They don't care about the color of the logo anymore. They feel about how much trust they have in this organization. And you want to take that trust into your core where you can focus on that customer journey. So that's sort of my final thoughts on that.
Well, it really seems like you have prepared to have final words that really match up together. Like you said, Justice, I used to say to my team, being able to provide stability, security, and compliant banking operation, that's the entry ticket to being able to play. When that is in place, what you're saying that the one-size-fits-none approach to banking will not be viable in the future, and it's not possible to be as customer-centric as you want as long as the core is built on a one-size-fits-none. And also, like you said, Marcus, it certainly applies to fintechs, but banks have to really acknowledge that you have to choose where you are going to be the best. Which products, which services will you serve to which customers on their premises? And everything else, you have to source from the ecosystem around you, like you say, Ayaz. Partner up, deliver a customer experience on the customer premise rather than trying to fit your customer into the funnel of the bank. So I thank you for joining this discussion, both from our excellent panelists sharing their insights. I learned a lot. I enjoyed this very well. And thank you all for listening in to this panel discussion on core banking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.